Good morning. Welcome to Freeway Bible Study for today, the 29th day of March 2018. My name is Kurt Bell. I'm your host of Freeway Bible Study. I'm a non-believer. Let me check my bike out. Looks good. Ready to go. I don't believe the supernatural parts of really anything. But our focus right now is the Bible. I imagine there's some history in there. Some interesting bits of wisdom here and there. And lots of beautiful writing. But I don't believe in the existence of God or heaven or hell or angels or a soul. But I study the Bible so that I can understand this set of documents is a cultural is what it is kind of a foundation point for much of Western culture and a point of interest and influence for global culture. So I do this once a day, Monday through Friday, taking a break on the weekends. I move forward one chapter a day from Genesis through Revelation. And today we're on Genesis 23, the death of Sarah. So we're getting close to the end of the story of Abraham and his wife Sarah, who have been the subject of our focus for most of Genesis so far. Of course, Abraham is a descendant of the first man, Adam, and in turn Noah. And although I kind of lost track of the lineage there, is he from Shem's house, Ham's house, or Japheth's house? I suspect he's from Shem's house. It would be interesting to trace that back. Shem seems to be the favored son of Noah, but that's more detail than we need in this chapter. We've been following Abraham through his life in the Promised Land and down in Egypt. And at this point now, he's an old man. He's got two sons. One of them is wandering out in the wilderness. That's Ishmael and his mom Hagar. We wonder if Hagar is still alive. And he's got his other son, Isaac, the son of that he had with Sarah. And now they're getting quite old. And this chapter opens with we just finished going through the incredibly difficult chapter 22, which is where Abraham is tested on the mountain with God, who asked him to sacrifice his only son Isaac. So that was a real slog to get through that yesterday. A very emotional one. Lots of consideration. Really. Well, maybe I'll comment more about that. No, it's probably okay to do it right now. Let's just interject real quick. That, of course, the test of Abraham is one that we all remember, and I will remember it now as well. Less for the test of Abraham's obedience or fear, because the purpose for the test, or the reason that it was successful, is revealed as differently in the King James Version and the New International Version. In King James, it's because God rewards Abraham because he demonstrated his fear of the Lord, whereas in the New International Edition it says that God was happy because Abraham was obedient to the Lord. And those are two different things, right? Although I imagine some Christian scholars might, or even rabbinical scholars, religious scholars, theologians I should say, might argue that they're one and the same thing, obedience and fear, but I think they are different. I wouldn't reward my daughter. I would reward my daughter for her obedience if I gave her a curfew of 10 p.m. to come in, which actually her curfew now is 11 p.m. to be in. I would be pleased with her if she obeyed me because of that, because it was she basically respected my authority as her father, and did so by virtue of maintaining that good relationship and in recognition that I am her father. Now, if she did it out of fear, she got home before 11 o'clock because she was afraid of me for whatever reason, I don't think that speaks so well of our relationship or her motivation or my parenting. So the result of Genesis, so the story ends differently in Genesis in King James versus the New International, and that was not an insignificant difference in my mind, and that really stood out to me. But I'm getting off in the weeds. The other thing that I saw it differently, and I will remember that. I will remember that distinction when someone might tell me that one version of the Bible doesn't really matter from another version of the Bible. I can see a big difference there in how the story can be read and the impression that we can get from it, and even the interpretation. So the other part was, last thing to say on that, and all the more reason why I've always thought that, not always thought, but last couple of years I've thought that if an omnipotent really did exist and wanted to communicate with us, it would do so through so messy and challenging a medium as words. They would probably do it through mathematics, for which proofs can be offered that are immutable. We could truly indeed then have a timeless message that was impervious to languages or biases or prejudices or the changing ways that we live and our cultures work through time. It would truly be, E equals MC squared holds up now and 10,000 years from now in Middle East, in the halls of an Iranian mosque, just as well as the Vatican. I would imagine that a really worthy God, or a God at all, worthy of the name, worthy of a capital G, would know better. Otherwise, otherwise we're left with this messy, spaghetti of words that are subject to misinterpretation, and thus cause each of the major branches of the Abrahamic faith to splinter off into their respective sects. Yeah, it's a mess. So the other thing that I got from Genesis 22 was the perspective of Isaac, which really moved me, and it only came through in yesterday's video when I was riding along on this same commute, and it suddenly dawned on me what it must have been like to be Isaac in that story. Abraham's son, the boy that was bound and placed atop the firewood and had the knife held to his throat, unless he was under some enchantment from the Lord, in which case why the rope, right? Yeah, but unless that was the case, then it must have been a real horror for him. And to use modern language, PTSD, maybe a little PTSD. Anybody? Lifelong trauma, emotionally scarred. I wonder if sacrifices from thence on, every time there was a sacrifice, if that was the trigger for a young Ishmael. It's like, whoa, I'm going back to the tent. I don't mean to make light of it. I mean, we're talking about two major things: child abuse and child sacrifice. Even though they didn't go through with it, there are instances coming up in the Bible where they actually do go through it. So child sacrifice wasn't, and human sacrifice was not over at this point. And of course, it won't really be over until, in many ways, really until the death of Jesus. So Genesis 22. Why do I have a feeling that chapter will be emblazoned in my consciousness forever? I'll be able to pull that. This is one of the really good things about this exercise. I will be able to pull the lessons of Genesis 22 from my mind in the future and use these. And again, as I've said in other videos, it's not my first aim to go after Christianity or Judaism or Islam, but I will gladly do so at every opportunity, because I do think this is religion in general is a failed cul-de-sac of human endeavor. had its time. It had its purpose. It was our first attempt at civilizing ourselves and explaining the universe. It was our first science in a way. But we've got much better tools now. There's no reason to continue laboring with a mechanism that involves superstition and dogma and allegiance to authority. It's time for us to grow past that. Stop scaring children with fairy tales of a tormenting afterlife and threats of eternal damnation. Let's instead open their eyes to the wonder of the mysteries of the universe, and to not shirk from those mysteries by explaining them away, but by joining the effort of answering them and trying to understand them better. And if we find God along the way, then so be it. We haven't yet. We haven't found anything yet that doesn't eventually rest on the shaky substrate, the sandy foundation of faith. Until we can get past that, then it really it's not a structure that we should build any more upon. Except maybe perhaps to perpetuate some of the more beautiful and benign elements of it, such as music and art that have come of it, and of course culture and literature. I mean, there's a lot of that in there that again, I come back to one of my favorite books, Moby Dick. I mean, the opening line, probably one of the greatest opening lines in English literature. Call me Ishmael. That line, resonates more. Even it's already a fantastic opening line, but it resonates so much more when you consider its context in the Old Testament, in Genesis. Wow. Okay, so back to Genesis 23. I thought this was going to be a short video, but that's good that this one, Genesis 23, is a short chapter, an easy chapter. So I'm glad, because it gave me a little bit of room to talk about Genesis 22. Genesis 23 is the death of Sarah. So remember, Sarah had Isaac when she was 91 years old, and Abraham was 100. And this is in a time we don't live much more than 120. And I think Sarah was, kind of forgive, 123 when she died of old age. And we are in the land of the Hittites. I think they said Hebron. Is that right? And it's spoken differently in King James and New International. It's the Hittites, and they're called differently in one of the books. So I guess it must be two names for the same people. So even though they've been there a long time, and even though you could remember they were wandering kind of people, even though they've been in the land of the Hittites for a long time, does that mean that what is his name? Abraham and, remember the king? I can't remember his name. Not Chedorlaomer, because he was way back. The king that is like the king of this land right here, Amalekite, or not Amalekite. I can't remember his name. Oh, the Amalekites. We'll get to them eventually. Well, whoever, there's a king there. Does that mean he was a Hittite? That's interesting. I think that puts two and two together. For some reason, I can't remember his name. Darn, because we were just talking with him about 1 or 2 chapters back. He was the same king it's the king that he had the treaty with, right? So, over the land, the dispute over the well. Anyway, again, I'm spinning off into the weeds. So, this land, they are basically, to use that word again, sojourners upon the land. I guess Abraham and his hosts don't really have their own land, or maybe not land suitable for burial, because Sarah's dead, and now Abraham goes to mourn with her, and he kneels by her body and weeps and mourns her. And then when he stands up, he looks around, and I guess he walks over to the gates of the city. I don't know which city that is, but he walks over to the gates of the city, and he's addressed as the Hittites, and he says, I've been a stranger here, and I need some place to bury my wife. Is there anyone, can someone sell me some land suitable for burial? And it's interesting, there's a little footnote there. Well, this will apply to Sodom as well. It notes in the Bible that the Hittite men are gathered at the gates of the city. And I didn't realize this until now, and after the events with Lot at Sodom, with the angels that came to Sodom. And I questioned that why was Lot hanging around the gates of the city at dawn, at evening? Doesn't he have something better to do? And then I read a little footnote that said that hanging around the gates of the city was kind of a thing to do for the big men of the city, for the city elders. And I'm thinking this city is more of like a village, so we're getting a little glimpse of the culture of that area. And I'm thinking, we think of a city, I'm thinking like a walled fortress of the Netherlands or something like that, one of those star fortresses that I saw when I used to go to Europe. But no, I don't think it's like that. It's not like a medieval city. It's more like a village. Maybe it has a fence or a wall around it, or maybe nothing. It just it probably has a fence or a wall, some sort of thing, because there's a gate, right? So it makes sense to have a gate if you need a fence to allow entrance to a fence. And the big men of the city sit out on a chair. And I saw a photo actually of a city of one such area that actually had a little low bench along the wall, and then there was like a little covered area there where a statue of the king or the god would be placed. And that really reminded me of Japan, where I used to live, where we would indeed have like roadside statues by the entrance of a temple or something like that. And I mean, it was so common. I mean, I could know sometimes if a little trail at the side of the road was going to lead to a temple by whatever artifact I would see by the side. So it made sense. And since everybody had to come through the gate, it kind of made sense that the wise men, who probably had nothing better to do all day, I mean, they're the village elders, they let their slaves do all the work. They can sit around outside the right outside the town, and they can see who's coming and see who's going and talk to everybody as they're coming and going. And that's what the wise guys do, right? I mean, not the Al Capone wise guys, you know what I mean. So that's exactly what happens with Abraham. He goes from Sarah's body over to the city, and the men of the Hittite strong men, I guess, or the elders. Why do I struggle to keep remembering how to say that? They're not thugs necessarily. They're just the elders. The town elders are sitting there, and he addresses them that he needs a place to bury his dead, and he'll gladly pay what it's worth if someone will sell him the land. And the men now we have an interesting back and forth between the men and Abraham. The men respond, and I'm wondering if this is how negotiations were done at the time. If we're getting a little glimpse of the period. Pardon me, because the men say. Oh Lord Abraham, I don't know if they call him Lord, but they're definitely being deferential and respectful. I mean, you are a great prince among us. We will gladly give you whatever land you need, just for the asking. Just let us know. Even the best among us, not one among us would balk or be upset at all if you asked for their burial space. So we're imagining that all the families have a family burial place, but it typically sounds like they're locked off in a cave. And there must be a limited supply of caves, right? So I mean, those things are probably worth a lot, and we'll see that it is worth a hell of a lot, excuse me my language, in just a minute. So this is no small thing. And I remember in Japan we have our family burial spot as well, where all the families buried in this one thing. So Abraham responds back and says, that's very nice of you, thank you, but I'll gladly pay. That's great. And then the men say, oh, well, just let us know, what you want. It's some kind of say the same thing back and forth. They're saying, take the choicest plot amongst our fields, and we'll gladly give it to you. And Abraham says, I'll gladly pay for it. And finally, he picks out a cave at the end of this one field. I can't remember the name of it, but the cave and the field have a name. And he picks that out, and he says, I'll take that one. Can you please and he names the guy that owns the field. Can you let him know that I'd like to buy it from him? Well, guess what? He happens to be there amongst the crowd, and he kind of, pushes through the crowd and says, here I am, and he says, Lord Abraham, or whatever he said, please don't ask me, please don't, suggest that you have to pay for it. I will gladly give you the cave. And I was wondering how those trucks are working that out. I will gladly give you the cave. And again, Abraham says, no, I'll pay you for it. And then And then here's where the interesting negotiation part comes in. The guy says, this cave I have is worth 400 shekels of silver, but I'll give it to you. So he's like giving him his asking price, while at the same time continuing the generous banter of giving it to him, which I'm totally suspect we're getting a glimpse of culture right there. That must have been how so many of these exchanges happen. No, take it, it's only worth 10 shekels, but take it, I'll give it here, all right, here it is, and here's the shekels. So that 10 shekels comes in handy, because we'll remember back when was it Chedorlaomer? No. Was it the king? Who was it? What was it? With 1,000 shekels? Oh yeah, Abimelech. That's the name I was trying to remember earlier. Remember? Sorry, I was trying to say, what was that king's name? Abimelech. He's the king of the area. Do you remember way back 4 or 5 chapters ago in Genesis? There's a chapter where Abraham and Sarah are up to their old tricks from Egypt. Remember where they pretend that they're not married, so that the men of the area won't kill Abraham? Well, they did that when they came into the plains of Jordan, here in Canaan, and King Abimelech tried to take Sarah, who was 90 years old, as his wife, and the Lord, intervened and prevented Abimelech from, doing the nasty, and thus, invoking God's wrath. And so, in penance, Abimelech gave Abraham. But he did for the bargain. He did go ahead and seal up Abimelech's wife's womb and all of his slave girls' wombs. So to kind of get out of that pickle, he apologized to Abraham. Well, he did complain to Abraham. He said, "Why did you do this to me, dude?" And here's some cows and sheep and stuff, because you have the Almighty God on your side. It's kind of reminded me of a thug, right? It's like you got this. Abraham saying, yeah, I'm just a lowly guy, but I got this big guy back here, and he don't like things, people messing with me. So Abimelech gives him the cows and the sheep, and he throws in 1,000 shekels of silver. I called it gold when I made my original video. I didn't realize that until later, but it was silver. And I was curious at that time how much money that was. So I looked it up, and it turns out that at that time, your average worker, like your laborer, could expect to earn 10 shekels a year. So that's a lot of silver. That's like what was that? 1,000? What would that be? 100 lifetimes worth of. So Abimelech was pretty scared, and we know all of his men were pretty scared, because they were followers of the one true God, and here clearly God's got some favorites, right? And I think we can safely say now, because of discussions I've been having on Facebook, that Jesus has favorites too. Because I've had an open discussion going on Facebook, asking people about the eternal permanency and connectedness of God, Jesus, and the Holy Ghost. And I've been told that basically we can consider them one and the same throughout all time, that they are co-equals. Maybe if not perfect co-equals. Some people thought maybe God was like the like the boss, and like one person said like the CEO, and Jesus is like the manager, who goes off and executes the business. In which case, that's even worse, because that means that Jesus would have been actually at play behind everything in the Old Testament. So with all that, I can with confidence now place Jesus at the scene of the crime, of the offense, of the persecution, of the genocide, of the commandment at every turn in the Old Testament, and that's amazing. Again, I'm not actually fishing for these kinds of things, but that's the kind of understanding that really opens my eyes when studying the Bible. So let's back on the shekels, right? So we know that 10 shekels a day was the amount that a workman would earn in a year. 10 shekels was the amount a workman would earn in a year in this time. And the man that's, Abraham's fishing around for a cave to buy. That's all he wants is a cave. He doesn't necessarily want the land. But here, this one guy that owns this one cave that he's interested in says, and the going rate is 400 shekels. Now, that's 40 lifetimes, right? If I'm doing my math. That's 40 lifetimes of work. That's a lot of work. Well, but then, like I said before, caves must have been, caves just don't manufacture themselves. We can make a cave, but probably any natural caves that were in the area were you had to pay a price for that. Otherwise, you'd have to, because maybe that was the optimal way to bury. Maybe that's like in a modern cemetery, having the primo spot with the big old tombstone. It's going to cost some money, but that's a lot of money. So the negotiation is made, the contract is signed. Literally, it sounds like they signed kind of there's like a deed thing that goes on, and Abraham gets not only the cave, which actually has a beautiful name, I wish I could remember it, but he also gets the land around it and all the trees and everything, and that's it. And now he's got a place that he can bury Sarah, and I guess he just buries her. It doesn't really, I don't think it says anything about the burial itself, and that's, I think, exit stage left for Sarah in the story. And that's pretty much it. That's the end of the chapter. So now we can kind of breathe a heavy sigh of relief. Look at the steam over there. It's rising up from the water there. Not steam, but just mist. We can breathe a sigh of relief. We made it through Genesis 22. And Genesis 23 was rather sedate by comparison, and we're moving on. But we know we got a long slog ahead of us. If this was Frodo on the great journey, we haven't even left the Shire yet, and already we are muddied, bloodied, and appalled. I am, at least. I don't see wisdom and justice or benevolence in much of anything that I've read so far. I see favoritism, short-sightedness, incompetence, and favoritism on the part of God, Jesus, and the Holy Ghost in their creation and management of a world and people that they would call their own. And with that, I'll stop. And I hope you all have a great day. Make it a good life. And take care, everybody. Bye-bye.